Welcome to In Response, the Magic the Gathering debate show. I'm Cube April, and today I'll be subbing in for Josh Lee Kwai, who is out sick.
Our first topic this week is the return of the core sets. It was not too long ago that Wizards of the Coast announced the end of what was an institution since the very beginning of Magic the Gathering, the core set. And it did not take that long for them to completely reverse course. Core sets will be returning next year and replacing one of the 4 block sets that was in place in their absence. Is this a good thing? Do we need core sets back, or should Wizards have stuck to their original decision? April, you're going to be arguing against the return of core sets, and you get the first word when you're ready. 90 seconds.
So I have been playing Magic for a very long time, and when I started playing Magic, the core sets were called Beta and Revised, and they were fine. These were just sets that were around because Wizards thought that these cards, 6th edition, 7th edition, would be good for the formats that were being played at the time. And you know, they weren't anything, they were just cards that you occasionally bought. And they had cards that you sometimes needed for your standard decks. And over time, Wizards thought, you know, hey, let's make this into a draft format. And, you know, they've been sort of successful. Occasionally a core set is really fun, like M13, but most of the time, they're pretty milquetoast. They're kind of boring. People are rarely like, super excited for a core set. And the reason is that the core sets, they just don't have a strong identity. They don't know what they are. Are they for beginners? Are they for people who are new to Magic? In which case, why are they around just once a year? You know, why don't they have frequent core sets all the time for people to pick them up and play? Are they for experienced drafters and franchise Magic players? In which case, why do they just have returning mechanics and so few of them, which makes the draft format so boring and so, like, just not fun to do over time? The split identity is why the core sets were discontinued. It didn't know what it was, and when it comes back, it's still not going to know what it is. There are ways you can have that core set experience, get those cards into standard where they're desperately needed, without having to compromise by taking up valuable print space and valuable set time away from actually interesting new worlds and expansion sets.
So you've been playing since beta?
I have been.
Wow. How did you start? What got you started?
Just a couple of my friends like showed up at the house. They're like, April, I have some of these sweet cards. You have to play this game.
All right.
I saw a wall of ice and I was hooked. All right, Profo, I'm very interested in hearing what your defense of the core sets are. When you are ready, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I'm so sorry that some of the most advanced players in the game do not find core sets to be the optimal drafting experience. However, for the rest of us, core sets are what Magic the Gathering is. You yourself said it. Core sets were revised. 4th edition, 5th edition, 9th edition. This was essentially Magic the Gathering, and expansion sets, what we call block sets, were add-ons to the core game. Have core sets had an identity issue? Yes, they have, because the game has changed. But that doesn't mean that we needed to get rid of them. And I think the very fact that Wizards of the Coast so quickly changed their mind means that the data showed that the game suffered without them. Who are they for, you ask? I would say they're for the vast majority of players. Again, not the advanced pros or want to be pros, but rather those who want to go down and play Magic at a more reasonable intermediate level, at a beginner level, at a casual level. These are people who are going to enjoy drafting the core set because it is not extremely complicated. These are people who want to get cards like Llanowar Elves or Birds of Paradise or Doomblade or all these other staple or core cards that define just basic Magic. We need the core set. Otherwise, all Magic is the frosting, and we need the cake as well, which is why they've come back.
I just want frosting. The cake is just empty calories.
Right, okay. No, that's the frosting that's empty calories. But of course, that's just my view on it. April, you have 45 seconds for your rebuttal.
You make some very strong points about the core set, Professor, and I agree. There needs to be a product for beginning and intermediate Magic players. But guess what? Those products already exist. They're called dual decks, they're called intro decks. We print these supplemental products several times a year, and you could use those products to put cards directly into Standard. If Standard needs a Hero's Downfall, or a Pithy Needle, you just put those in a dual deck. You label it DD17 for that year, and those dual deck cards are legal in Standard. That gives you quick response time. If Standard needs a piece of hate, you could just throw it in a dual deck. The people who are picking up these decks, they'll think, Pithy Needle, this is a card I don't have. And the people who play Standard are like, Pithy Needle, oh thank gosh, this is exactly the card that Standard needed to save it from, some abusive Planeswalker or activated ability.
So everyone has to buy a dual deck now if we need the Pithing Needle to be legal and Standard. My only way to get it is through a dual deck, so all players have to buy them.
No, you don't need to buy a dual deck. The dual decks, by definition, are just reprints of existing cards. Most of them are cheap hate cards that already exist that are just a few bucks, and if they go up because they're now in Standard, well, you just buy them in a dual deck.
Okay, all right.
All right, Professor, when you're ready, you have 45 seconds for your rebuttal.
We cannot keep dividing all the different needs to play Magic the Gathering into all of these different sets, supplemental and expansion and otherwise. We're already on a very perilous cliff. In order to get the reprints needed for modern and eternal formats, we have the Masters series every couple of years. In order to get what we need for Commander, we have the Commander supplemental products, and now, possibly for Standard, we're going to have added purchases that are required in order to get those reprints? No. You need a core set. Every game has its core edition, what that game is with all the fancy pieces stripped apart, and Magic needs this as well. It's the go-to. It's the basic. Dominion has it. Netrunner has it. Every game has it, and Magic needs it as well. So the idea that actually is interesting, despite what I was just saying in the rebuttal, is this idea of being able to print cards needed for Standard through supplemental products, sometimes even for an emergency printing of, we really should have Pithing Needle in Standard. Let's just say Pithing Needle is legal. Let's put it in this Planeswalker deck that's coming out. How viable is that really?
I actually think it's pretty viable. I don't know their lead time on their supplemental products. I know that for an actual expansion set, it can be years.
It is years.
It's years ahead of time. But I think the supplemental products are much quicker.
How do you feel about that? Well, you're not really a big Standard player.
I don't like Standard. I like the more diversity of the bigger formats, like Modern and Legacy. But I think, I really do think that people want to play in a Standard that's fun, and people like the cards that were broken in Standard. I think people genuinely like playing against Emrakul. Well, maybe not some of them. Maybe not Emrakul. But people like playing with some of these cards, right? But they don't like that there's no way to deal with them. And I think I think if Wizards just had a way to say, wow, we really messed up. We really I don't know what you're thinking this time, but we really miscosted something, or we just didn't print the right answer to, a format that has been broken, and just say here are some answers that you have. You can't do it too often. I don't like saying just that something is legal, because I think that would make people worried that, their deck could just be dead at any time outside of
Well, it's like the opposite of a banning. It's people are worried about bannings, but what about simply it's not an unbanning because it wasn't banned, but to simply, the Pithing Needle is the example we keep using, but if we just suddenly said, hey, you know what, Birds of Paradise is now Standard legal until Standard rotates, out of nowhere, no cards got banned, but theoretically, certain cards could shake up a format massively. Standard shakeups, they could call it. What about creating cards that get sold in supplemental product that do become Standard legal? What if they said, okay, hey, guess what? Surprise, we're coming out with the Standard Showdown pack, and it's a little 40-card deck, plus it has a rare in it that is a rare we've never seen before, but is now Standard legal. Would people go for that? Would people not like that?
I think there's a fine line to walk, because as much as you can say, we're just adding cards to the format, there are sometimes cards that you can add to a format that just can that is essentially the same as banning a deck. There are some formats where if you just say, Ancient Grudge and Shattering Spree are both legal, they're just going to kill decks. So they're just going to straight up kill decks. And so I think if you just start saying these are legal, people will start to say well, you're just banning cards out of Standard, but you're just doing it in a roundabout way. But if you have a product with a 6-month lead time, Wizards can be looking at data and be we printed this card, it is appearing like it's problematic, so we're going to give players time for it to shake out, we're going to give 6 months for this deck to shake out, and it's just going to appear in a supplemental product. And I think people will have a lot more, I think they'll be a lot less annoyed about it if it's a printed product, it's got, the year 2017 or 2018 on it. It will just become part of the ecosystem.
You know what I think would work better? Core sets back, more than 60% of reprints. Make those reprints really good cards. Make them not just the cards that we identify with, Lightning Bolt, Giant Growth, Doom Blade, cards like that, but also reprints that are needed for other formats. Pay attention to what you're doing. Don't put Thoughtseize in a standard where there's going to be an overwhelming presence of mono black decks where you've created cards like Pack Rat. Use it so that when people have said we can reprint Force of Will, and it's not going to be so overwhelming in the right standard environment even, and use that as a way to get people excited about, interested in core sets. Never mind that they're not always going to be that great to draft. Not everything is. There's other alternatives to it, and then everyone's happy. It's the core Magic the Gathering set.
Either way, I think we both really agree that like the possibility of adding cards that are just around for a year like lets you do some really crazy stuff. Like, you know, you can try Force of Will, you can try Lightning Bolt, you can try Counterspell in Standard, and if it's too good, if it breaks things, well, it's only around for a year. It's not like an expansion set or a core set that can be around for 2 years.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next topic. It's another change, of course, for Wizards of the Coast. April, tell us about it.
So Wizards recently announced that masterpieces will no longer be featured in every Magic set. We know they will not be in the upcoming set Ixalan, and thus far they have not announced when masterpieces will return. We know they will return, but they will not be a constant feature as they have been for the last couple sets. The professor here believes that this is a good move for the future of Magic. So Professor, when you are ready, you have 90 seconds to present your argument.
There's no other way to put this. Masterpieces were unsustainable. Look at how many of them have already been made in just a few short sets. Where would we be in 2 to 3 years? We would be out of ideas, and some say we already are. What exactly are invocations? I can't define the theme. We went from lands, which we went through all of them, to artifacts, which we went through all of them, or almost all of the ones that needed reprinting, and now third set with masterpieces, invocations. No one can define what these things are. There's no rhyme or reason to what's been included, and it's overwhelmingly getting a lot of disappointment, and not just because of the controversial frame. They were making too many of them. These special, ultra rare, ultra mythic, however you want to define it, cards in packs as a means to sell sets and keep prices down. Fine idea. However, in terms of long-term stability, there's no way that this could sustain. Perhaps, and only perhaps, if they had done just a few per set, like instead of all of the fetch lands in Battle for Zendikar, it had been 3 of them, and that's the only expeditions present there, and we were still getting masterpieces of lands now, then we could have stretched this out. But the number that were included was so high that it couldn't be maintained. They're going to come back as a special thing to help spice up some sets, and while I don't like the idea that this is going to be utilized when there's a dud set as a way to help it sell, I do think they needed to be discontinued. But of course, that's just my position on the issue. I've been very sketchy on masterpieces since the start. April, you see it a different way. I'm very eager to hear what you think. 90 seconds when you're ready.
So people online don't just know me as April, they know me as Cube April. Why do they know me as Cube April? Well, it's pretty obvious. My cube is my pride and joy. It's my #1 love in my life. Forget my kids, it's all about the cube. So I have spent years and lots of money making my cube as personalized and as beautiful as possible. This involves expensive foils, it involves masterpieces, it involves artist proofs with sketches on them. You know, to cube people like myself, personalizing your cube is just as much fun as actually cubing. And masterpieces have been the perfect thing for cube players like myself. It's like Wizards went out and they thought, how can we make the perfect cube product? Let's make masterpieces. These cards are very expensive, and people like myself spend a lot of money to put them in our cube. And as a result, that money that we spend on these cards pushes down the price of all the rest of the cards in that set. When you have $60, $100 masterpieces, that makes rares or mythics in the set that standard players rely upon just cheaper by proxy. There can only be so much value in a given box. That's just how it works. If the value of the box was higher than the box, people would open more boxes. So naturally, the value of the box will converge towards the value of the cards inside there. When the value of the cards is tied up in masterpieces, all those other cards just become cheaper. My friends who play Standard, who, you know, when we cube, they say, April, thank you for buying masterpieces. You've made Standard so much more affordable.
So I've already commented on the lack of sustainability that there were with masterpieces. I want to touch on 2 points that you made. Number one, the fact that collectors want to go after that bling. Well, let's look at Amonkhet. Are the masterpieces hotly desired? I would say no. In fact, if we look at prices, many of them are available relatively cheap for such ultra rares. $20 masterpieces, $25 masterpieces make up the bulk of the Amonkhet invocations, and so people are already losing interest. They are not pursuing these for their cubes as much as they did the Expeditions of Zendikar. Now, those are some really expensive masterpieces. Those were hot in demand. Those caused lots of boxes to be opened, and yet Gideon, ally of Zendikar, was still and is still ridiculously expensive, so it didn't decrease cost that much there either. Apologies, I had a few extra words there. I'll gladly extend that privilege to you should you need it. Either way, April, the final word is yours.
I appreciate the offer, Professor, but I don't need any extra words. What I think is happening is that you are conflating the low prices of invocations with people not wanting masterpieces anymore. Really, what I think is happening is that the invocations are just not that aesthetically pleasing. They look cool when you flip them back and forth as a foil, but cube players don't like how hard they are to read from across the table. Other games like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon have picked up on the fact that ultra mythic cards with just special foilings, with special aesthetically different frames, are good for the health of their game because there will always be a subset of the player base that is willing to spend big money on these cards. That in turn pushes down the price of all the other cards in the set. Maybe it's only a little bit, maybe it's never going to be like it was with the Zendikar lands, but for Standard players, every little bit helps.
It's interesting that we're seeing so much of a look at other games and what we can take from them. I mean, you said it yourself, the masterpieces are reminiscent of ultra rares and hyper rares, and now they got rainbow rares or whatever, and Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess does it as well. And are we just copying what other people are doing successfully? Is that a good thing, or is it showing that we're out of ideas? I mean, it's if you see someone doing something correctly, imitating it is a wise course of action, but at what point are we no longer defining what makes Magic magic, and we're just being another flavor of every other game?
Sure. I mean, I think if you just, if you say that, you know, we're only going to do it if it was invented here first, then you just end up with a game that is worse as a result.
Sure.
I mean, you know, Magic is a great game, and I think as long as you have these ultra mythic rares that are only aesthetically different, you know, I think that's just a great way to go about it. People have different tastes, you know, people like different arts, you know, I don't think it hurts if you just have, you know, only aesthetic differences that are expensive and that people want to collect. I think if they were to make an ultra mythic and have cards that only show up as at ultra mythic, you know, I think that would be a huge mistake. You know, there's already debate about whether Mythic was a good idea in the first place or not.
Ah, that's a whole other one. I'm against the Mythic.
I know.
Yes.
I totally agree.
God. All right. Going on to the next topic. Next topic. Our next topic has to do with modern legality. Whenever supplemental products are made, whether they contain original cards, such as in the Commander supplemental products, or reprints of cards, such as in dual decks, these cards are included in the Legacy format, but not Modern. Should they be included in Modern? When cards such as True Name Nemesis are created for Commander and they are Legacy legal, why not Modern as well? Well, Cube April wants to argue that they should be. April, I think this is a kooky idea, but let's hear why you think it should happen.
You're right, Professor. My idea, it is a little bit kooky, but I think it's also a little bit brilliant. Let me explain. People love to play Legacy. Why? Because there's so many cool archetypes, the cards are so powerful, and the answers, they're equally powerful. But, you know, it's never going to be open to a huge percentage of the player base because the cards are so expensive. When Volcanic is $250, when a whole deck costs $4,000, it's just unaffordable to the vast majority of the player base. And that's fine. Those players have found a great home in Modern. But Modern itself, while a very fun format, is also quite limited. And why is it limited? It's limited because Standard forms a choke point on the cards that can enter the format. You will never see a card like Force of Will appear in Standard. It's just too powerful, it would push every deck towards blue. But if it existed in Modern, it can make Modern a much more interesting place. It could open up the format a lot. You could say, we're going to unban a bunch of Storm cards. You can have back Ponder and Preordain, which were broken before, because now all of a sudden you have strong answers in Force of Will and Flusterstorm and Daze. You know, you get answers like Wasteland to the Eldrazi deck, to Tron. These are powerful answers and powerful cards that will never appear because of Standard. But you could say any card in a Modern frame is suddenly legal in Modern. You know, sure, you might have to ban cards like True Name Nemesis or Sol Ring. That's fine. That's going to be the case. But all of a sudden now you have interesting new archetypes. You have Astral Slide, you have the Psychic Lands, you have all these cool things, Show and Tell, Sneak Attack. Cool things you can do in Modern that you can't do now and will never happen with the current way that Modern is structured. Well, Professor, I know it's crazy, so this is going to be an interesting response for you. I'm really excited to hear it. You have 90 seconds when you are ready.
Well, I don't need 90 seconds here, April. All I need is enough time to say the reason this idea is no good is because we want Modern to be Modern and not Legacy. Just look at your examples. Why, if Force of Will were legal, then we could have Ponder and Preordain, Flusterstorm, all these wonderful blue cards. Blue, 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 blue. Well, now we're all going to be playing blue in Modern because that's pretty much what you're playing in Legacy. No, this is not a good idea. Legacy is in worse shape than Modern these days. And what happens with cards like True Name Nemesis? Sure, you're listing that one as banned. What's Daxos the Returned going to do? What are all these weird commander cards going to do? What is going to happen to prices? Force of Will has been reprinted once in a limited set. Suddenly every deck in Modern as well as Legacy needs a play set? Give me a break. The card's going to be more expensive than its weight in gold, and it's not on the reserve list. How about you make a Legacy reserve list Legacy and see how that works out for you, because that's essentially what you're pitching here, is you're saying, let's just make no reserve list Legacy. Fine, try that in Legacy, leave Modern alone. Another issue here is that chokehold of cards going through Standard is what makes Modern such a good format. The fact that every supplemental set with its weird, unique cards doesn't become Modern legal is what keeps this such a dynamic format, because it does have to first pass through Standard. Quite frankly, I wish that were the case for Commander, but that is another topic. But of course, April, I know that this is an idea that you actually personally care a lot about. It's kind of a pet desire of yours, so I am curious to hear what you want to talk about in your rebuttal. When you're ready, let's hear your final word on the subject.
So I've been playing Modern since it first became a format. I played Storm just to see Storm get banned out of existence. I played Birthing Pod to see Birthing Pod banned out of existence. And I played Splinter Twin and saw that disappear as well. Why have all of these decks disappeared? The answer is simple. There are just not strong enough answers in Modern. We're never going to get these answers in Modern if we have to go through the Standard process. We're never going to see Force of Will. We're never going to see Wasteland in Modern. Sure, it doesn't necessarily need to be Legacy Light. You don't necessarily need to bring all of Legacy into Modern, but you could bring some of the really interesting, cool archetypes like Astrocide and the Cycling Lens. You could bring those into Modern. You could open up all these banned decks back open again, and you could have even more diversity and more cool decks in Modern than you have now. Alright, Professor, you've heard my kooky argument, and then you heard my even kookier rebuttal. So you have 45 seconds for your counter rebuttal. Have at it.
Well, I get the feeling you really like Legacy, because all you seem to be getting at here is that you want to turn Modern into Legacy, and I feel that that's a great disservice to Modern. It's not the same format, and I don't think it's fair, honestly, objectively, to say that one is superior to the other. I love Modern more than Legacy, but I'm not going to say it's the better format, but it's the better format for me personally. And what you're doing is you're just looking at it and saying, why can't we make this as much like Legacy as possible? Well, that exists. It's called Legacy. Should we just be reprinting everything and everybody play Vintage? I think that a diversity of formats is what helps Magic the Gathering the most. Pauper, Standard, Modern, Commander, Legacy, Vintage, we all find our place, and you are taking from that diversity and taking from the game. Well, I definitely think more than anything, it's great to have a diversity of ideas, and it's certainly some interesting things to think about. For people who want to hear more of your awesome ideas, April, where can they find you?
Well, I have my own YouTube channel where I record with Magic the Ametrine called MTA Plays, but most people find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter under Cube April, where I basically am an evil version of Mark Rosewater.
And if you haven't checked out Cube April's Twitter, I strongly suggest that you do. Also, her gameplay's top-notch. We're going to provide links in the description. April, thank you so much for filling in for Josh this week.
Thank you for having me, Professor. I really hope that Josh gets well soon.
I do too, and we'll be seeing him next week, and we'll be seeing you in those gameplays and on Twitter. Until next time, when In Response resolves. And this program was made possible thanks to a sponsorship from Card Kingdom, as well as the Patreon support of viewers such as you. So thank you.